This podcast is brought to you by the Almanac and Scientific Canada. It was recorded on the traditional territories shared between the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations. Enjoy. I feel like I just butchered that again, even though
That's close enough.
we just had the conversation. Okay.
My research on light adaptation in the fish right now.
I'm sitting in a kiddie pool, actually. It's quite nice.
Oh, that would be great.
But it's
man.
not very professional, as they say. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the show. I am Adam, and I'm your host, and today we're talking animals. So have you heard about this? This came out sometime late last year, around November, I think. And the headline says this: The Cat's Meow, ex-Amazon engineer launches cat speech translation app. So the engineer's name is Javier Sanchez. So the idea of this app, so you download this app and you have it listen to your cat's meows, and it interprets the tone, pitch, and various other things, and then it spits out the human equivalent of what your cat is trying to say. So I don't know how you feel about that, but this made a decent amount of buzz near the end of 2020. If I were to guess, I'd say about a week's worth of buzz. I, for some reason, just kept seeing this headline pop up like every day for about a week. I'm guessing mostly because it was A, a slow week in the world of science, B, it wasn't a wholesome and cute story, and C, it's about cats. Everybody loves cats. But I was a little bit disappointed with the coverage of how it works. So I dug into the app description a little bit, and I'm just going to read you what they describe the app as in the Google Play Store. Each cat has their own unique vocabulary that they use to communicate with their owners. Let's see. For example, a cat can have their own distinct meow for food or let me out. It's not necessarily a language, as cats do not share the same meows to communicate, but we can use machine learning to interpret an individual cat's meows and translate that into human-readable language. So then they describe the presets that come with this app as already able to translate into 9 different general intents of cats. These 9 intents represent cat moods and states of mind and are as follows. The articles that I read also related it to 9 lives. I don't know why they would do that, but here they are: happy/content, defensive, angry, attacking, mother call, mating call, in pain, resting, and hunting. So in addition to these 9 general intents, each cat also has a unique vocabulary of meows. You can train Meow Talk to learn your cat's vocabulary. And so what you do to do that is you follow your cat around, and every time it meows for food, you record it on your phone, mark it as meowing for food, and the app starts training itself via machine learning to look for commonalities in each of these food meows. So there might be little subtle intonations and various things that you don't pick up on as a person that this machine learning app can sort of figure out. So it's a fun concept. I wouldn't say super groundbreaking, since it's a little bit deceptive the way people are writing about it. You're not learning a cat's language exactly, but in theory, it seems like it would make sense that you could, record a whole bunch of data, have a machine pick out nuances, and then, use that to translate. So it kind of makes me curious how much better the app can do compared to a human that really knows their own cat. But what about the other way around? That's another thing that you could ask. Like, can animals start to learn differences in human speech? If this interests you, well, stay tuned. This is exactly what our guest studies. So this week, our guest is Sabrina Schalz. She's a PhD student in Urban Evolutionary Ecology at Middlesex University in London, England. So the way that I was introduced to Sabrina's work is actually through Twitter, and I'm going to tell you all about that in the interview. So yeah, actually, instead of spoiling anything, maybe we'll just go right to the interview. So here is Sabrina Schalz talking about her research. Okay, welcome back to the show, everybody. Today we have a very special guest, Sabrina Schalz. So I just recently met Sabrina over Twitter. I saw that she was recruiting for a very interesting sounding study. We're going to get to that in a second, but first, maybe we should just get to know our guest today. So, Sabrina, you are a PhD candidate in Middlesex College or University? What do they call it over there?
University.
University, okay. Mm-hmm. So that is in London, right? London,
yes,
England?
London.
Okay. So Hamilton, Ontario people will know that we have a London, Ontario, where I went to school, but this is the bigger one, the cooler one. So you're doing your PhD, which means you have been in academia for a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So were you always in Middlesex, or did you start somewhere else and then travel around? What was your academic
somewhere else. I studied in Germany at my bachelor's degree in Bielefeld, which is a very small town in Germany. I studied biology and linguistics initially, and then I transferred for my master's to Middlesex. And my master's was about evolutionary behavioral science, which is a bit more specific than what I did before.
Okay.
And then I stayed for my PhD here in Middlesex.
Cool. So it sounded like you kind of, like during your undergrad, did you have like an idea that you wanted to do behavioral ecology? It sounded like you started with some linguistics. Was that like a arts and humanities type thing, or like a hard science type thing? Like what was that all about?
Well, I started with linguistics initially, but I wanted to go more into a natural science angle. So I added biology later on, and then I discovered ecology and behavioral ecology and fell in love with it immediately. And yeah, then I just tried to kind of combine linguistics and biology, and that's what I ended up with, this very weird and niche area that I'm in now.
Cool. So tell me about this niche area. So I did a little bit of reading, and I saw some, you're interested in birds, but more specifically crows, and even more specifically a special kind of crow?
All crows.
All of them, okay. Right, so this crow business started once you moved over to Middlesex, is that correct?
No, it started at the end of my bachelor's, actually. I wanted to do an experiment with any sort of bird initially. I wanted to test whether birds can discriminate languages based on just the sound. And then I tried to find someone who would supervise this idea. And the professor who I found was working with crows. So that's kind of how I got into the crow business and stayed with it.
That's really cool. So it sounds like you said you kind of focused in on this area and then looked for a supervisor that was, had similar interests to you. That's fairly unique as far as I know. People that I know who went into academia seem to sort of peruse around and see what supervisors are looking at and then jump into that. How did you get so inspired to find crow-based projects?
Well, crows are songbirds, so they're very perceptive to very detailed and specific cues in sounds. And I thought that a songbird would be a good choice for the language experiment because they would have to be able to perceive these very small, detailed cues in speech. And songbirds might just be more able to do that than other birds. And there's not that many labs who work with songbirds with this kind of angle. So the choice was already narrowed down for me. Okay. And then I just looked at the work other people were doing and who I found interesting, and that's how I found my supervisor.
Cool. So I've heard of crows being very smart and using tools and things like this, but I never really thought of them as being songbirds, but I guess they are. And so you identified that a songbird would be a good choice for these sort of linguistic studies. Is that basically because, they vocalize, they seem to have some interesting vocalization patterns? They probably have, their brain is probably set up to do that kind of thing?
Yeah, songbirds have to learn their song. So it's not innate as in other birds, but they learn their song from usually their parent. And that's a very special ability that they have that makes them very good choices for language-based research. some songbirds are the go-to study organism for language research, like zebra finches, for example, or budgies. These kind of songbirds are very popular with language biologists in general.
Okay. So I know nothing about songbirds. You said that they learn from their parents. Are the different crows sort of families? Do they have their own sort of version of, or is it very specific to the species? Like every crow of a certain type has the same song?
Well, in songbirds, it's usually an individual song that they have.
Okay.
So it's something that they learn from most often their father, and then alter a little bit so that every bird ends up with its own little melody, in a sense. And what's kind of special about crows is that they don't really use their song to communicate with a large number of crows, but usually just in a very close contact with their partner, which is unlike other songbirds that you might hear on the streets. So when you hear a songbird in the streets, that's a song it learned, but with crows, you're unlikely to hear the song ever.
Okay, interesting. That sounds like they really sort of, this makes it sound like they would be the perfect thing for trying to pick up on human speech or things like that.
Yeah.
So from the bit of research I did before talking to you, and what you described already, you said you were trying to see if these crows would pick up on human speech patterns, different types of human language, and be able to differentiate the two?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we played Japanese and Dutch to the crows, and kind of watched how they behaved when they heard these two languages, just to see whether they would hear the difference and react differentially to either one of them. And actually the crows were living in Tokyo. So they were caught in Tokyo and then living in a lab in Tokyo. They were more attentive to Dutch when we played the Dutch than when we played Japanese. So they had a very different kind of reaction to either of these languages, which showed us that they do in fact hear the difference, which is really cool, I think.
Yeah. When you say more attentive, are you able to identify if it's like out of cautiousness or like were they entertained? Like could you ascribe some sort of like reason for the attentiveness, or is it mostly just like their crow ears perked up or something like that?
Well, it's hard to say, but the behaviors that we observed, that we focused on, were whether they were closer to the speaker for one language than the other. So we kind of measured the time that they spent right next to the speaker, which might indicate curiosity. And we also tested whether they were looking upwards, so whether they had their head at a level like this, or maybe looking upwards like this, but not looking down, because we thought that if they were looking downwards, they wouldn't be attentive or not vigilant, wouldn't really care. But if they were being vigilant and thought, I have to pay attention to this now, then they would look up. Okay,
interesting. So these crows, they grew up around Japanese, and when they heard Dutch, they were more attentive and potentially more interested. This is a new stimulus. I can tell the difference. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So is this something that you kind of expected? I'm sure there's literature, studying crows and their speech stuff. Is this sort of a hypothesis that had been floating around, or is this all brand new?
Brand new.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. It's a very small area, so there's not really that much going on. And the previous research into this kind of thing was done with monkeys and rats and this other songbird, but not with crows. So no one really thought to try it initially. So this is a very lucky find, okay, in a sense.
That makes sense, actually. I didn't even think of that. Monkeys, these sort of studies probably would have happened with something a little closer to humans first.
Yeah.
And probably like babies and things like this, like early childhood
babies
development.
were the first.
Okay, that makes sense.
Babies were the very first.
I guess that is pretty surprising, though. Birds are very different from from humans. I don't need to tell you that, of course. So that was kind of When did that actually happen? I was looking at the your website, and there was some media stuff about that just this summer. Actually, it seemed fairly recent.
Yeah, I initially did the experiment last year in summer, but then it took some time to get this paper out. And initially, I was planning to present the paper at a conference, but that was cancelled because of the pandemic, and everything kind of slowed down. So the talk that I gave on this research was my first chance, basically, to talk about it, and that was just a month ago, I think. And now that I've done this talk, it's kind of starting to get going a little later than we actually did the study, but that's fine.
Hey, that's still really cool. How was the conference? So you had to present it online and digitally and everything?
No, they cancelled it.
They fully canceled it. Okay.
Yeah. I
That's
did a
too
talk at this society here in London that was interested in that.
Okay. Okay, cool. The society in London, was this sort of like a science outreachy type thing, or is it like a group of scientists, or?
It's a mix of both. It's the London Natural History Society, and they are very engaged in science communication, but also have some background in science. So it's a very on the border between the two.
So your background again is linguistics, and you got into speech and animals and things like this. And I mentioned at the top of the show, the first introduction I had to your work was a couple days ago via Twitter. You're looking for people to help you out with a study. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
You were looking for volunteers via Twitter, and
Yes,
it's not birds.
No, it's cats. I'm changing gears a bit.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, this is kind of a follow-up study that I'm doing right now, in addition to the crow research. So initially I did my master's about whether humans can recognize individual birds by their voices, in a sense. So I played them recordings of birds from the same species, and then had them tell me whether they thought it was the same bird they heard or a different bird in each of the pairs of sounds, to kind of see whether they would hear the difference between individuals, because the birds I tested were songbirds again, and they have this individual pattern in the melody that other birds can perceive, but I wanted to see what the humans can as well.
Okay.
And we found that they can, in fact.
Oh, interesting.
Very good at it.
Okay, so almost like the opposite of your crow study in a sense.
Yeah.
Ish.
Yeah, it has to go both ways.
Yeah, that's very surprising. This kind of sounds like I haven't read any of the actual studies of this, but I've heard pop science likes to, look at behavioral ecology and stuff. But the idea that, there's some cultures that humans can grow up in that like they will be able to say certain sounds and hear certain sounds. I think French has like an sound. I can't do it. I'm sure I can't do it. But based on that idea, I would have expected that we would be like hopeful or hopelessly lost when it came to songbird songs.
Yeah, I think so. But actually, to my surprise, I didn't really expect that. It worked really well.
Okay.
So the discrimination was very accurate with songbirds, and I think it's because they have their individual pattern, just sort of a rhythm that they have to their song that is always the same, and that might be easier to perceive for humans than just the regular voice cues that people have, for example, or that other mammals would have, because these voice cues would just be based on the shape and size of your vocal cords and your vocal folds and your vocal tract and all this stuff right here. But with the songbirds, you also have the pattern and the melody, how they sing. And as it turns out, that really helps them. And they were doing really well with the discrimination.
Okay.
Individuals.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe you can break it down a little bit. So with the songbird and a human trying to identify differences, you're saying that there's like a melody difference. So if this is like a song, it would be like humming a different tune. There's
Yeah,
definitely a rhythmic difference that would just be like different beats or different speeds of certain things.
yeah, almost also like different words because birds have different patterns as well. So it's like birds are saying their name in a sense.
Okay. So it's almost like there's a percussive, like how you can go tsk, tsk, those sort of sounds. They have different versions of that as well. They place them in different spots.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. Interesting. So it's almost like learning a language.
almost, yeah.
Okay. So then this turned into cats somehow.
Yeah, I did. The thing is that previously, before we did the experiment with birds, there were two other studies that tested this kind of thing with monkeys and with dogs. But they found that people are really struggling with the discrimination of individuals in these species. So with the monkeys, for example, babies were doing really well, and babies were doing just fine, but adults were doing poorly and just a little bit above chance level. So there was some ability, but very limited.
Okay.
And with the dogs, people were unable to tell dogs apart based on their barks. And these are the only animals, to my knowledge, that have been tested doing this kind of thing. But there's an emerging pattern from this very, very small sample that it's because birds have this very distinct pattern that we can discriminate them. But with other animals without this pattern, it doesn't work. Some mammals it wouldn't work, but birds does. And that's where the cats come in, because now I want to try this with the mammal and see whether there actually is no mammal that we can tell apart individually.
Okay.
And yeah, everybody has cats. Everybody can record their cat. So that was a very kind of easy way to get into this again and find cat recordings.
That's really interesting. So it almost sounds like this project was born out of like you had to make do with whatever you're able to get because of COVID.
Yeah, always.
So do you think if it weren't for lockdowns, you would be still focusing on birds or on different type of mammal? Is that like the reason you picked cats, or?
No, it's I'm actually doing both. I'm still working with the crows, with wild crows, but I like to do some side projects.
Okay, cool.
To keep me doing extra work as well and kind of change stuff around a bit every now and then. And I wanted to kind of continue my work from my master's just so that it doesn't just vanish.
Right. I totally get that. Yeah, so what you're having volunteers do, I guess, it sounds like you're having them record their cat for, their cat doing just anything in particular, or just follow them around for the day, or?
Yeah, I just need a good sample of meows, basically. So it has to be the same kind of vocalization always. So it can't be hisses or purrs or whatever other sounds cats might make.
Okay.
So I'm just having them record their cats meowing, basically.
Okay.
And it's been going really well. People are so helpful and are so nice. So many people have reached out and sent me recordings of their cats. It's amazing.
Yeah, from being on Twitter, I see people will say things like, "Oh, I just had a really bad day. Can you send me some pictures of your pets?" And
Yeah.
those will turn into like thousands and thousands of replies. So this seems like the smartest way to get a whole bunch of data that I've ever heard of. It's fantastic. And so then the idea is you pair, or you collect a bunch of human people as well to listen to these and try to tell the difference between. So you'd have to normalize for certain things like people's recording. Like, can you strip out background noises and things like that, or?
Yeah, to some extent. And I'm also kind of filtering quality of recording. So based on what kind of recorder people used or how much background noise there is. There's some recordings that are so good that I can just immediately put them in the yes file and then kind of sort through the maybe files and see what I can get out of those.
Okay.
But there's so many that I have lots of choices.
Right. Yeah, that's fair. You could probably just the automatic yes pile is probably just huge at this point. Yeah, and so I guess another little segment of the show sometimes revolves around like advice for grad students and young undergrad type people. So how would you describe your academic trajectory? Was it like pretty standard in your eyes, or do you feel like you like changed your mind about what was interesting several times along the way? And maybe you can
Changed
comment
so
on that.
much.
Yeah.
It's changed a lot, yeah. Going into uni just out of high school, I thought that linguistics was my calling and the right thing for me. But from the first day, basically, I thought, oh no, this is not what I like. I don't like this at all. And then I had to go an entire year through my first year before I could change my major, because I had this very different idea of what linguistics would be than what it actually turned out to be. So the first thing I should have done would have been to research it a bit more.
Okay. Yeah, because I was thinking, based on what you've told me about your research, it does sound similar to what I was expecting linguistics would be about, but some of the aspects you've just described almost sound like philosophy or like English literature or anthropology even, not necessarily a science even.
It overlaps with a lot of kind of areas, so it's a very overlapping multidisciplinary kind of area. Yeah.
Okay. And so you finally sort of landed in a location that feels a little bit more like what you were expecting, or have your interests just drastically changed?
Yeah, I just changed it a lot, what I was doing in my undergrad. So I switched to biology as a major and changed linguistics to a minor. And then in biology, I got to do all these kind of natural science things and got to learn about animals and genetics and so on, which was a bit more into the area that I wanted to do, but biology alone wouldn't have been exactly what I wanted. I still wanted to have some sort of language component in there. So it was really lucky for me that my university has this kind of combinational bachelor's where you can do multiple things combined into one bachelor, which you usually can't really do. So I got to do both of these things, and then in my master's and the PhD, I kind of get to decide for myself how much weight I want to put into each of these areas and how much each of these contribute to my research, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cool. So that sounds really interesting. I can't wait to hear what happens with the cats. So where can we follow you to get more info about this and more details? You're on Twitter.
Yes, Twitter is always a good choice. I tweet a lot, and I'm also on ResearchGate, where all my papers are, and my website has the same stuff basically again.
Okay, awesome. And I'll link to all of that in the show notes, and I'll like to point out that your website has some articles that the media has published covering some of your work. So some of that is I would say required reading for anybody listening. There's some good stuff in there. And are you still looking for volunteers for cat study? Probably
no,
not.
There's so many people already.
Okay, cool.
At this point, no. But maybe in the future.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you so much, Sabrina. This was really fun.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is really cool research, and it's really cool how you managed to, turn this, being stuck maybe out of a lab, not really like connected with people, into like an actual serious project. Actually, this kind of reminds me, and we won't get into this too much, but there was also something on your website about shopping and.
That was a research my current supervisor and I did theoretically about how people have been shopping in the first instance of the pandemic, and how people have been leaning towards panic buying at first. And we discuss the psychological reasons behind this and what kind of drove people to do this and what kind of logical explanations there are for people behaving like this. So
Okay.
Very recent stuff.
Very topical. I think my city is going back into lockdown pretty soon, so
No.
maybe they'll be panic buying for something else. I'll let you know if anything interesting emerges, and maybe we can design a study.
Thanks.
Okay, that's all the time we have for this week. Thank you again to Sabrina. You can find her website, sabrinaschalz.wordpress.com, or her on Twitter at Sabrina Schalz. That's Sabrinaschalz. You can find me on Twitter at Adam Forte. You can hear more episodes of this on scientificcanada.ca. And if you want to support the show, you could always check out our Patreon. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week.